Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending today's Abatement Academy webinar. My name is Adam Rosatelli, Director of Finance for the Opioid Abatement Authority. So the purpose of this webinar series is to highlight examples of programs and efforts that align with nationally recognized principles for the use of funds from opioid litigation. So today we're very fortunate to be joined by three speakers, Anna Champion, Kinsey Weaver, and Meredith Lane, who are with the New River Valley Regional Commission. And we'll be discussing the topic of recognizing and addressing stigma as a barrier to treatment and recovery. So the New River Valley Regional Commission is an organization comprised of 13 local governments and 3 higher education institutions for the purpose of encouraging collaboration to address regionally significant issues and opportunities. The organization encompasses the counties of Floyd, Giles, Montgomery, and Pulaski, and the city of Radford. So to begin with some brief background information about our speakers. So Anna first joined the Regional Commission in 2021 to support the COVID vaccine rollout efforts and returned in 2023. She's the Community Health Project Manager, primarily focusing on the New River Valley recovery ecosystem, supporting the Commission's work to address the impacts of opioid addiction and concurrent concerns such as prevention and treatment strategies, recovery and harm reduction, and food and housing insecurities in the region. She holds a bachelor's degree in biology and chemistry and received her doctorate in biomedical and veterinary sciences from Virginia Tech, with project management experience stemming from academia and the entertainment industry. Kinsey serves as the Community Accountability Coordinator for the NRV recovery ecosystem, where she leads the facilitation of the outreach and treatment technical team. She joined the Regional Commission in 2023 and brings a strong background in public health and community engagement. Originally from the Hampton Roads area, Kinsey has called the New River Valley home for the past 3 years. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Public Health from Old Dominion University. And Meredith is an undergraduate student at Virginia Tech, majoring in criminology with a minor in peace studies. For the past year, she has been interning with the Regional Commission's Recovery Ecosystem Initiative, where she currently coordinates the justice-involved technical team. Meredith brings valuable insights and connections from the collegiate recovery community to her role. In addition, she serves as the Vice President of Students for Sensible Drug Policy at Virginia Tech. And really quickly before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. So this webinar is being recorded, as you already heard likely. And if attendees have any questions for our panelists, please enter those into the Q&A function. And as of now, any questions answered will be for each topic prior to the speaker's transition into the next topic. So we'll just kind of roll with that and see how that works initially. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to our first speaker.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. My name is Anna, and I am I'm the project manager at the Regional Commission for the New River Valley Recovery Ecosystem. And we will be talking about our anti-stigma and education training. And but first wanted to give you just a little bit of an overview of the recovery ecosystem and kind of how, there it is, give you just an overview of the ecosystem, and then we'll go into talking about stigma and what we're doing to address it in our region. So establishing the ecosystem. The ecosystem is more than just, the name of the project that is funded with the OAA funds. It is, it is a larger idea so that we can develop an interconnected safety net for people in our region that have substance use disorder. And it brings together the counties of Floyd, Giles, and Montgomery and Pulaski, as well as the city of Radford for the funding opportunity, and then a bunch of service agency partners in our region. This planning for the regional project started in the fall of 2022 with the Planning Commission, the Health Department, local government leaders, and our local community service board, which is our main provider of mental health and substance use services. Basically, they got together and we're trying to figure out what is needed in our region, what we currently have, what's working, what can be expanded. This region in Southwest Virginia has a really strong track record of regional cooperation that started well before the pandemic. It started with infrastructure projects, budgeting together, and really solidified during COVID where the localities came together to really try to deliver what was needed to the citizens and discuss health and well-being of the region as a whole. Public forums were held in each locality to hear from the citizens what they thought was needed regarding substance use disorder. And all of that was taken into account, and a 5-year comprehensive program plan was submitted to OAA in the spring of 2023. So that was the first year of opioid abatement funding. And that came with a local match from our governments of almost $2 million. And that was like their direct and individual funds, as well as now through year 2, we've had 4.38 million in cooperative competitive funds that have been delivered to our area. We are really trying to expand and enhance the services that we're working in our region and take advice from the local experts at these service agency providers that are doing a lot of, that have been doing a lot of the work, and kind of, work, like do lessons learned, and we have leadership meetings every month with the local governments and the heads of the agencies to discuss what's working, what needs improvement, and really tried to implement this region-wide data collection tool as well to try to understand like where people are going for these services and how the referrals are working across the region. And just to give you an idea, I made this for OAA. Tony asked me to send this in because we are such a large project. Montgomery County, bless them, is our fiscal agent. Like the competitive funds, as you can see from the black lines, go down to each of the counties. The red lines are individual gold funds. The blue lines are direct funds. And across the bottom, we have our service agency partners that we work with. Additionally, on the upper right, and I can't see it with this thing here, we have our buckets, like what we call our buckets of where our work, buckets of work, basically. They're also our technical team. So they meet quarterly or once a month with local experts in the region around transportation, justice involved, outreach, harm reduction, education training, anti-stigma campaign, communication, and housing. And this is sort of just a general setup of how our project is managed and how the workflow goes. And to give you a little highlights of projects that are ongoing in our region that have been funded by the OAA. Our region, Southwest Virginia, geographically very large, very rural, doesn't have a lot of public transportation options through most of it. So we, in 2022, came up with the idea that on-demand transportation for people that have substance use disorder could be very helpful in getting people to work, to treatment, things like that. It kind of morphed from lessons learned into a scheduled ride. It's very hard to do on demand. If anyone has questions, we can answer that, but it's very difficult. We now have 3 service agency providers, 5 vehicles were purchased, and we've also leveraged our OAA funding with a Department of Transportation or rail and public transportation funding through our community service board to increase our operational hours. So now from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., we offer free rides for people with substance use disorder. And this year to date, we've done 4,224 rides. It goes up every month. So people are using the service, and we've gotten a lot of very positive feedback from this. In our outreach and treatment, one of the biggest successes we've had is, along with the New River Health District, the development of Rise Above, which is a mobile harm reduction program. It's also a certified safe syringe program. They go out to each of the localities at least once a week, deliver services. They bring along peers from other service agencies as well, like around housing, things like that. They have expanded our data collection immensely. They collect data each time someone uses the services, asking them like where they've gotten other services, where referrals are, things like that. So it's really helped on that side of things. We've also developed a peer coalition for our region, and the community health center here has expanded their OBOT program as well. A lot due to the numbers of referrals from Rise Above. We have a justice involved technical team as well, and some of that programming has been expanded as well. The recovery court, we now have dedicated clinicians specifically to recovery court participants, and expanded our the pro-social programs there, which not only allow for the recovery court participants to join in, but their families as well, and invites graduates to participate and stay a part of that recovery community as they continue on outside of the program. And another big thing is the Day One Center in Giles. It's a recovery center. It's going to open later this year. And it's going to include a peer center run by the Community Service Board, a health district office, and a gym space for their recovery fitness program, which is a big part of their recovery court program. And this space is not open just to people in the program, but to anyone with a substance use disorder or that has a family member with a substance use disorder. So, and lastly, there's a couple more things before we get into our actual anti-stigma and education talk that we've developed just this year. We're building a community support fund. This is money that will go to they'll be available to each locality to be used for emergency wraparound services for people that with substance use disorder. We'll have 2 new peer centers that are opening, one in Floyd, one in Giles, with our goal to open 1 peer center in each locality throughout that 5-year program planning that we did. And I think with that, I'm going to move on and give it to Kinsey and talk more about the anti-stigma campaign.
Thanks, Anna. Hi, my name's Kinsey. I'm going to talk a little bit about our stigma work that we have done. So all of this programming that Anna has talked about, whether directly or indirectly, has been addressing our impact of stigma in our region. So stigma generally is any negative belief, assumption, or judgment that we have about a behavior or a group of people. As we can see in this little graphic here, the cycle of stigma ultimately results in isolation and a loss of relationship. You may have heard in talks about substance use disorder and recovery, connection is the opposite of addiction. So stigma really is just our loss of connection, whether that's to treatment, resources, community, wherever it may be. Stigma can be broken down into 3 main areas. So self-stigma is the internalized beliefs that we have about ourselves, self-judgment that prevents us from seeking help and receiving it. When society may label you as something negative, like dangerous or harmful, you can start to believe that yourself. Social stigmas really surface through our conversation and the language that we use. This is something that really presents itself in Appalachian culture. Generally in Appalachia, we have a strong tendency to keep our personal struggles private. We want to avoid discussing something that feels challenging and vulnerable and difficult. And that's a big part of our anti-stigma work, is to kind of change the culture there, where we feel like we can have conversations that talk about our recovery, substance use, our trauma, coping mechanisms, and all of those things. And it's not only accepted, but it's encouraged to talk about those things, because the truth is, the more we talk about it, the more we realize actually a lot of people have empathy for this, and it's incredibly common, and we can find community in this together if we talk about it. And then structural, of course, those are the policies that create barriers, whether that's to healthcare, workforce, housing, our justice system, whatever it might be. It all perpetuates the thought that substance use disorders are a moral failing. And it doesn't have to be an ingrained policy. It could just also be a structural belief, like we don't want to hire somebody that's on medication for opioid use. But that creates more barriers to not just your work, but then your healthcare, and then your housing, and so on and so forth. So all of the stigma work that we have been doing can kind of be put into several buckets or areas, and we hope that all of these different things can kind of cover the varying demographics that we have in our region. So we have mailers, blogs, socials, events, education and training, and storytelling work. And the link at the bottom is to our Road to Wellness website. So for mailers, we chose this age range, 35 to 65, because in our region, they are the most impacted by opioid overdose. And they're also our bridging generation. So they have interactions with their children and grandchildren, those that are younger than 35, and then also their parents and grandparents, so anybody over 65. We reached about 35,000 households with our mailers. All of the content was linked back to our blogs and socials that we'll talk a little bit more about, our website, and then a lesson learned after the first mailer. The first one was specifically addressed to an individual with their name and their address, and then we changed that to just current resident so that nobody felt that it was information that was targeted towards them, but it was more just an awareness of the campaign and the education that we were providing. So the examples of our 3 mailers, the first one was just an intro to the recovery ecosystem, getting people to our website, seeing what this is about, what is this funding, what is this term recovery ecosystem, who's involved, what's going to be done, what has been done, and all of those things. The second mailer, this one was about connection, of course, linked to a blog that talked a little bit about that. And then we also got locality support there, so we were able to add their logos, which was really cool. The third mailer was sent out around the holidays last year, and this one talked about conversation and how to have those talks when our family and friends gather. So it linked to a blog that talks a little bit about that. And then so for our blogs, we try to have a consistent cadence there, posting about 2 a month. And we learned that partnership and collaboration is key, of course. So anytime that one of the partners or stakeholders that we work with cross-post our blog on their social media, the views increased quite a bit. So that was really cool. And then we have some examples of the blogs that we have posted. We did a series on myths versus facts. We like to highlight the partners and the programming that they are doing. So we have one on NRVCS Recovery Court, the different kinds of recovery communities that we have, the peer network that was growing. We like to have some that are more like applicable takeaways. So learning the lingo and change the conversation. That was all about acronyms, learning how to talk about this and being comfortable with that. And we also like to post local news, and our mobile harm reduction program has been featured a few times. So we like to post a blog on that as well. And then, of course, our socials are all linked back to our blogs. And as you can see, spectrum of use model was presented in one of our blogs here too. So we use similar designs to link it back. And then again, just relatable recent content. So we recently posted about the Peer Support Act, which was the bipartisan bill that was about expanding peer opportunities. And then we get to use that to talk a little bit more about our peer coalition and what we're doing locally to expand peer opportunities. So that's a little bit on our socials. We're still working on growing that and keeping a consistent cadence and making sure that it's good content that people want to see. And then, of course, we have our local training opportunities. We have a coordinator on our team that coordinates all of the education and training here. And so she has regularly provided adverse childhood experiences or ACEs training, trauma basics, trauma-sensitive schools training, and then Chris Alderman, our harm reduction coordinator with the health department, does some training on harm reduction as well. And really, the training opportunities are just such a great place for the dialogue, to challenge misconceptions, to ask the questions that maybe we've been afraid to ask, and just kind of get people together to talk about this. That's one of the most beneficial things that can come from a training opportunity, is to build those relationships and talk through some really difficult concepts. And then a new piece of education that has expanded and been further developed through the OAA funding in the New River Valley is the Just Say No curriculum. This was originally developed by the Medical University of South Carolina and piloted in Charleston and then piloted in a few areas in Southwest Virginia. But because of the connections that we have built with our school systems here, we were able to get it in every locality in the New River Valley. Actually, as we speak, it's being presented to a middle school, which is really great. It is a neuroscience-focused substance use curriculum. They talk about protective factors, risk factors. One of the most important parts of this is that it's led by Virginia Tech students, and we're very grateful and fortunate to kind of leverage that relationship with the university and have their neuroscience students come in, and there's that kind of like peer-to-peer dynamic. And really, ultimately, the goal is to empower youth to make informed decisions about substances. And we've seen that through the pre and post surveys. Not only was there an increase in their understanding and knowledge of their brains and substances, but the students also reported feeling like this was relevant, good information. And then so our first big training that we had here last summer was called Demystifying Substance Use and Harm Reduction. This was kind of the first opportunity where we really got everybody together to talk about this. This was a multi-day in-person training. The first day was kind of curated curriculum for anybody that was justice involved, so all of our law enforcement, our policymakers, and then the second day was more targeted for healthcare, and then kind of sprinkled in there was a mix of community leadership, our partners and stakeholders. And we hired a company called Elevis that was they're from Philly. We had a trainer that had a background in healthcare, a trainer who had a background in law enforcement. We had Jenny Atwood from the Chris Atwood Foundation. And then we also had our own Chris Alderman, who kind of brought in that Appalachian peer experience and was able to talk about what we are doing locally. And when we reached out to them about the training, we said, you know, we wanted it to be trauma-informed, a comprehensive understanding of polysubstance use disorders, the scope of the epidemic, medications for opioid use, and effective harm reduction strategies and what we were doing locally, and then the impact of stigma. And then each day was concluded with a peer panel. And then we did have a pre and post survey for this training as well, which we have a few highlights from. So about 2/3 of the participants had encountered an overdose in their current job. And then almost everybody knew someone who was personally who has struggled with substance use. So very relevant content for our participants. So after the training, participants felt that folks who use substances were a little bit less likely or responsible to be in their situation. We had a lot of dialogue on the choice model and trauma and how this results in substance use. And then, of course, how likely would you be to hire somebody? We talked a lot about workforce. And then people felt that they were more likely to hire someone who has a history of substance use after this training. And then training impact, we were really happy to see that people were pleased with this training. They felt that it was useful. They wanted to recommend it. They learned something new and it was relevant, of course. And if you all are looking to implement a training similar to this, a lesson learned that we are taking forward is just to start extra early to provide continuing education credits. This is going to increase the impact and participation there. And then asking leadership, like with law enforcement or healthcare, what kind of continuing education credits are you guys looking for and how can we help fulfill that? And that's something that we're looking to do moving forward. And then I'm going to hand it off to Meredith, who's going to talk a little bit more about events.
Thank you, Kinsey. All right. Hey, everybody. So as has been mentioned previously throughout this presentation, we know that a really key component with combating stigma is being able to develop community. So how do we actually do that? I'm going to talk a little bit about some events that we've been able to put on that have been supported by the recovery ecosystem throughout the past year. And as Kinsey mentioned, we've been able to leverage our relationship with higher education, Virginia Tech, Radford, our local community college. And so that's really one key piece of advice that I would have throughout this presentation, is to look into connecting with those institutions and resources, because there's a lot of richness and value behind those collaborations. So this first event that I'm going to talk about was a panel that was put on by Virginia Tech's chapter of Students for Sensible Drug Policy. And we were able to have neuroscience students from Virginia Tech speak at the beginning of this event, and then it was followed by a panel with some of our local peers and also the director of our health district, as well as a Commonwealth's attorney, to kind of get that wide variety of perspectives and different backgrounds to kind of engage students and also community members. I think this was a really unique event because we were able to bring different demographics of our community into the same room and have these really diverse dialogues going on. Another example of an event supported by the ecosystem was Appalachian Save a Life Day. This is part of a much larger regional project based out of West Virginia, but we had all 5 localities participate in the New River Valley. And this really does combat stigma because it's getting naloxone into the hands of a ton of people throughout the community, kind of just saying, hey, it is important that we are all carrying this life-saving drug, and there is no shame behind it because, you know, something could happen to anyone. So really normalizing carrying naloxone with you. And we also had tech students volunteer to hole punch, a lot of them, the little naloxone doses, because that way you can keep it on a keyring. Because one big issue with naloxone is that people often say they don't have a convenient way to carry it on their person. So I think being able to take it with you on your keys is one way of really normalizing that. Oh, there we go. And then we also had a recovery concert that also had a good student turnout in addition to a large community turnout. So another way of celebrating recovery and being able to have some community joy. And then also another way of kind of bridging those gaps between the student population and also the larger population of New River Valley as a whole, to kind of just get that exposure and different perspectives and backgrounds and engage in those really rich opportunities for connection, right? People like to say the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, the opposite of addiction is connection. So these have all been some really good ways to kind of form those relationships. Additionally, we did a series, well, we're going to do more of them, but we did a film screening of The Inheritance, which is an Appalachian documentary that really highlights the generational impacts of substance use disorder. We were able to have the main, I suppose, protagonists of the film, Curtis, along with the film's creators, come in to talk about this and engage in more of those community dialogues about how our region has been impacted by substance use disorder, and really just having these vulnerable conversations. Because as people like to say, stigma loves silence, and the best way to combat it is really to be able to engage with it with one another. And so we have a quick video that we're going to play. And in this video, we have the director of our health district, Dr. Noel Bissell, engaging in a conversation with former police chief Anthony Wilson. And I think this video is important because it highlights that evolution and mindset that we've been able to achieve as a region through these collaborative conversations. You know, stigma has been all around for a long time, and it's been quite a lengthy process to work at combating it. And, you know, of course, we still have a long way to go, but I think this video project that we were able to create really showcases that evolution.
People can get addicted within a couple of days of using these types of medicines. That's a huge problem. And then we got into this, you know, drugs are bad and you're a bad person for doing drugs. And, you know, we made folks who became addicted to substances these bad people. And we painted that image that they are bad people. And that's just, we created this problem. And then we're punishing the people that are victims of what we as a society, we as a profession have done. You know, and substance use has been around for thousands of years.
It's kind of the same thing we think about. You look at trying to stop incarcerate your way out of generational crime, which is historically has never worked. You know, you just continue to incarcerate. It has no effect. And it's sort of the same piece we're looking at here is we have to reunify these people back into society and take the stigma away.
So yeah, I think there were a lot of really valuable things said there, but to hear former law enforcement officers say, you know, we can incarcerate all we want, but that's only going to get us so far. I think that there is a lot behind that statement, and it's nice to be able to acknowledge and just show some appreciation for that ability to kind of evolve our thought processes. How do I? There we go. And so another strategy that the recovery ecosystem has supported to combat stigma has been our storytelling collaboration. We worked with our local community college, NRCC, to get some students who are in the recovery community to talk about their own lived experiences and kind of empower them to tell their own stories, create their own narratives in order to kind of foster a sense of normalcy and build those natural connections that we know already exist, but just need to be revealed and strengthened. And so one thing that we wanted to be mindful with when executing this project was making sure that the film crew and the videographers were going to be comfortable and experienced with navigating recovery spaces. The film crew even consisted of peers. And so Aspire Marketing Agency was really helpful with creating a good environment for people to be able to open up and talk about their experiences in a way that felt good for them. And we, you know, have these videos that we've created now, and we have hopes of sharing them with the community at large, particularly our younger demographic. And here's an example of one of those videos.
My self-destructive behavior started at 11, drinking alcohol, smoking weed, kind of a normal thing in my community, in my neighborhood, even in my household. My parents were drinkers. I look back now and I realize that I was a very anxious person. And I think the alcohol helped with my anxiety, helped me come out of my shell, or what I thought was a shell. Growing up when I did, and my father being on the older end, I feel like there was a lot of, you're a man, suck it up. That in itself created a lot of problems for my generation as a whole. I probably noticed a negative effect from drugs and alcohol as young as 18. 18 was the first time I actually got arrested and went to jail. I remember after a few days, I got to call my wife and I asked her to, you know, come and get me, bring some money, whatever. And she told me that she wasn't going to, unless I got out and went straight to rehab. Going straight to rehab was a very scary time for me. You know, rehab, I was in there for 30 days. I was there for Christmas and New Year's and all that stuff. So I know a few misconceptions about people with substance use disorders, or that they're choosing to do these drugs. They might have the first time, but just like you and I, everybody's allowed to make mistakes. The person with the substance use disorder is a person just like anybody else. If someone is diagnosed with cancer, they bake you a lasagna. If someone has a heroin use disorder, you're ostracized, you're shut off, you're closed off from the community, you're a leper. The average person, as far as helping, just be a good human. I mean, just be compassionate. If you see someone struggling, if they need help, or, it's as simple as holding the door for somebody and, starting a conversation.
Here we go. So yeah, those are all some examples of strategies that we have implemented. And of course, they're going to look different for every single community. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that these are all some ways of going about addressing stigma, but it's going to be varying on an individual level depending on who's in your community, what resources you have. Here in New River Valley, we have Virginia Tech and Radford and a really big presence of higher education. So we've seen a lot of that in our collaborative partnerships, but depending on where you are, that could look different. So I think just taking some time to really look at what's around you and who you have to connect with is a huge part of this. And yet again, hopefully you got the whole takeaway of this. But being able to bridge those connections within your community is really what we've been working at to try and tackle stigma. And here are some of our socials. You're welcome to check us out, check out our blogs, our website. Do you guys want to come back? But yeah, I guess we can open it up for questions now. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
All right, thank you all. That was fantastic. We actually don't have any questions at all in the Q&A function. So if anyone would like to ask a question of our panelists or of the OAA, we'd be happy to receive those. But in the meantime, first of all, thank you. That was great presentation. Lots of really valuable information. And I think one of the more remarkable things about the NRV ecosystem project and then other projects that the OAA has funded or otherwise been a part of in the south and southwestern portion of the state is like the level of community buy-in. So we've worked with a lot of different areas geographically throughout the state and provided funding. We've provided thus far, I think the most funding to that DBHDS region largely. And a lot of that had to do with just the level of immediate interest in obtaining the funds, right? Like as soon as we opened our doors, so to speak, and funding became available in 2023, it was when we officially opened. We had one award that went to Washington County for $115,000 in 2023, right? They were right there waiting for the money, right? Which is just kind of reflective of, again, the need, and maybe that's just the disproportionate impact that region felt historically, going back to the very beginning of the opioid crisis nationally, right? But anyways, that from a anti-stigma standpoint, when you've engaged with community members in the different counties and cities that are part of the region, is that your experience too? Are you seeing is there more like buy-in because they have a family member that's experienced this or a friend or something like that? Or is it kind of equal parts, anti just everything related to like MOUD or something like that? Or what's been your experience?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of empathy. I think at any training session or event, people want to share their stories of how they're connecting with this, which is really empowering. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I would say this is something that's affected almost everybody in some capacity. So you do have a lot of that willingness to share. And, we do have a lot of mixed opinions on things like MOUD. Naturally,
Yeah.
there's going to be differences in beliefs. And I think that's been an interesting, experience to navigate for us. But I think all in all, we've been able to find common ground with the people that we've talked to in some way to develop those relationships.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that answer. Yeah, it is. Going back to one of the videos you showed with law enforcement, and I think one of the kind of the sea change in the mindset of the justice oriented community with respect to this stuff is pretty remarkable turnaround in a short, I mean, relatively, I feel like short amount of time. I'm the product of the 90s, and the mindset was completely different in the 90s, right? 90s, 2000. And now we're at a point where elected officials in the kind of the justice domain talking about not having to or not being able to like incarcerate our way out of the thing is it's just pretty fascinating and good moving forward, I think. So anyway, we haven't gotten any more questions. I mean, I wish we could just hang out and talk because I think this is a really interesting topic. But anyway, that's all I have, unless you have any closing comments or anything.
Yeah,
No.
just thank you
Thanks
for
for
letting
having
us
us, yeah.
talk about this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, thank you again for your participation. And I know we have another webinar coming up, and they're typically about 2 weeks apart, and I don't have that information in front of me. So normally I would advertise that, but I'm sorry I don't have that right in front of me. But anyway, appreciate everyone for attending, and we will see you next time. Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.